My name is Lori Gooding, and I'm a grateful member of Al-Anon. My recovery date is July 1st, 2001. And my home group is a group called the Start Fresh Group, and we meet Mondays at 5:30. Right now we're meeting on Zoom like everybody else, but normally we do meet in person. Thank you guys for having us. I'm really glad to be here and glad to be a part of this. So I'm just going to get started so we can get this over with. I had two older sisters and an elder brother when I was born. They were waiting on me when I got here, and I didn't grow up in an alcoholic home. My parents aren't alcoholics. I have a brother that was 6 years older than me, and he died a little over a year ago from alcoholism. He literally drank himself to death, and it was the alcoholic death that is described in the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous, and it was horrible. My brother was 6'5", and he weighed 135 pounds, and it was bad. It was really bad. And, but I loved my brother, and I learned to love him and accept him for who he was and what he was. And I didn't learn that anywhere else but here. And I have a sister that is 10 years older than me. And about, I don't remember, it was like 10 or 12 years ago, she came into AA. And about 7 years after she came into AA, she called me, and I answered the phone, and she was crying. And I go, "What is wrong with you?" And she goes, "I don't think I'm an alcoholic." And I said, "Why are you crying?" And she said, "Because I really want to be." And I said, "Well, what's going on?" And she said, "I feel like a fake and a fraud in the meetings." And she said, "I've been back through the steps with my sponsor." She says, "Nobody can tell you if you're an alcoholic or not, but you're not an alcoholic." And she's not. And I said, "Well, why did you come to AA in the first place?" And she said, "Well, if I'm being honest, I thought my husband would follow me into the rooms." And I said, "Welcome to Al-Anon." And she actually is a member of Al-Anon today. And she actually just got a sponsor and started working her steps. And so I'm really proud of her. And then I have a sister that is 11 years older than me. And my eldest sister has drank and smoked and popped a pill and done something since I can remember. I mean, she's been doing that since I was a little girl, and she doesn't think she has a problem, and she doesn't think she's an alcoholic, and she may not be. I don't know, but I'm telling you, she gives a good impression of one. And then there's me, and I am the baby. And as my husband said earlier, I have never drank or done a drug in my life. And I know that freaks you out. I get it. I know you think you heard that wrong, or that there must be something wrong with me. And well, there is something wrong with me, but I just had seen what happened with my brother and my sisters. And it seemed like that when they drank and did drugs, that they had a lot of problems. And I just decided I wasn't going to be like them. And that was a goal. And I'm just going to tell you, I had that idea at a really young age. I mean, really young. And I just decided that was not going to be me. And that was because I think it was just inborn with me that I was going to control that kind of stuff. And I've always thought I could control things. I've always tried to control things, and you're going to hear about that. So that was just a decision I made at a young age. And I grew up with morals, and I grew up knowing right from wrong. I had a good family, and we lived in a small town. My dad was as old as people my age as grandfathers. My dad was a World War II veteran. He grew up during the Depression, and so he was a hard worker. He was a hard worker, and that's what I grew up knowing. We work, you just work. You do the best you can, and you tough it out, and that was, that's just how he brought us up. And we lived in this little town, and we lived on this little farm, and we had 10 acres, and we had cattle, and we lived in the country. And I loved everything about my life. I loved everything about my life. I had a good life. I loved my parents. I loved my brothers and sisters. I had a lot of fun, and everything was great. And then I turned 7. And when I turned 7, my parents divorced, and my mom moved me to a suburb of the city. And I'd lived in the country until then. And then she moved me to the suburb of the city, and I hated it. It was nothing like I was used to, and kids were mean to me for the first time. And the reason why is because I was the ugliest kid in school. And I'm going to tell you what I look like. Cliff would love to show you pictures, I'm sure. But I had buck teeth really bad. And then I had these eye teeth that were growing out through my gums because my baby teeth wouldn't fall out. So I looked like a vampire bunny. then I had this big nose. I got my nose fixed when I was in my 20s. My doctor said, your nose would look better on a man. I said, it does. It's my daddy's nose. And then I had these big, thick glasses because I could not see 3 feet in front of my face. I was a tomboy, so I was always in hand-me-down clothes or garage sale clothes. Had long, stringy hair, a skinny little kid, and I always hung with the boys. I always hung with the boys because I could do what boys did. I mean, it's just kind of how I was. I wasn't very hygienic, and so they had a lot to work with, is what I'm telling you. And so kids did what they do. They teased me. They called me names. And so what that did is that I became an isolator long before I knew what that was. I was a latchkey kid. My mom worked during the day, and I let myself in from school, and I stayed by myself a lot. My parents, when they divorced, my mom didn't really want a divorce, and she took it pretty hard. And so she started going out after the divorce immediately. And you know, like I said, she went to clubs every weekend. She went to bars every weekend, and she would go more and more as time went on. And like I said, Mom's not an alcoholic, but she wasn't going to party and get drunk. She was going to look for him, and she was trying to find him. And I can see that today, but I didn't see it then. But that's what she was doing. And so she would leave on a Friday, and I wouldn't hear from her again until on Monday, when she'd call me and tell me to get up and get ready to go to school. That's just the way it was at my house. I didn't think anything about that. And my dad was dating this woman I hated. And whenever I'd go to my dad's house, we went over to her house, and I hated her. And so I that's just the way it was. And then when I was 13, my mom finally found a man and met him and married him. And my dad married the woman I hated. And my life changed again. And you know, the guy that became my stepdad taught me a lot. He did a lot of good things for me. He got me glasses, and he got my teeth fixed, and he took me to buy store-bought clothes, which is the first time I can actually remember going in and buying clothes at a store. And he taught me a lot. He was a smart guy, and he knew a lot, and he taught me a lot, and he did a lot of good things for me. And I always want people to know that, because I do appreciate everything that he did for me. But our relationship kind of ended on a bad note. And what happened was, when I was 16, I caught him watching me take showers through the skylight of the bathroom. And I went and told my mom, and my mom caught him on the roof of the house, and it was 11:30 at night. And so my mom asked him what he was doing on the roof of the house at 11:30 at night while I was taking my shower. And he told her that he was cleaning out the gutters, which makes perfect sense to me, because that's when I clean my gutters, is 11:30 at night. And look, I don't think my mom really believed him. I think she just was too scared to lose that man. And so what happened was, I got kicked out of that house, and I went to go live with my dad and the woman I hated. And I moved in with them. And the problem at that time, now I'm a daddy's girl. That's what you need to know. I love my dad, and I would have rather been with my dad than any other person on this earth. But at the time, he was dying. And we have this kidney disease that runs in our family, and he was dying, and I knew he wasn't going to be around much longer. And so I did what I knew to do, which was just stay busy and stay away from him, because I didn't want to get too close to him, because it would hurt that much more if I was close to him and he died, or at least that's what I thought. And again, I think I can control things, and was my way of trying to control some more hurt and some more pain. So I stayed really busy, and I kept really active. And what happened was, my senior year, my graduation, the week of my graduation, actually that Monday before I graduated, my dad got a kidney transplant from his twin sister, and it saved his life. And it changed our relationship almost instantaneously. And he and I started spending a lot of time together. And I spent a lot of time with my dad, and I did a lot of things with my dad. We fished a lot, and we ran trot lines, and I don't know if y'all know what that is, but we did that. And we hung out a lot together and had some really good conversations. And I really got to know my dad pretty well. And everything was kind of rocking along pretty good. And then I turned 19, and like 2 weeks after I turned 19, I met this guy. And 2 months after that guy asked me to marry him. And about 4 months after that, we got married, and my dad hated him. And so when I, met him in September and then we were married by March, it was not popular in my house. I just want you to know. And my dad tried to tell me not to do it and that I was too young. And did I mention he hated him? And I wouldn't listen because I don't know what you guys were like at 19 years old. I think there might be some people on here who haven't even reached 19, but at 19 years old, I knew everything. And that also is a pattern that continued, not just at 19, up for years. I always thought I knew everything, and you couldn't tell me anything. And so I got married, and I immediately knew it was the biggest mistake of my life. But I was trying to be the good girl and I want to do everything right. And so there's no way that I can say that I've made a mistake, because I don't want to hear, I told you so, or I tried to talk to you about this, or this is, if you would have just listened to me. I don't want to hear any of that. So I just stay married, and I'm just gonna work through it, because that's what we do. We work, and I'm just gonna work through it. And we were married. We have this little boy, and he became the only reason I came home at night. And we'd been married about 7 years, and I was miserable, and I was really wanting a way out of my marriage. And I really, and I wanted it to be all his fault, because I want to look good. I want to get married. I want to get a divorce, but I don't want the stigma that goes along with that. I need a reason. I need a really good reason. And I didn't seem to have that good reason. And I don't know where this comes from. I don't know if it's from my upbringing. I don't know. But I have this list of things, of the reasons why you can get a divorce. And I didn't, and these weren't being met. One of the first reasons you can get a divorce is if they beat you, and he never laid a hand on me. And the second reason is if they cheat on you, and nobody really wanted him, so that wasn't going to happen. And I'm kidding. No, but he didn't cheat on me. And the third thing was they have to be an alcoholic, and he wasn't. I think back and I'm thinking, had he been an alcoholic, we might have stayed married. I don't know, but wasn't an alcoholic. And so those are the only reasons that you have. That's it. That's the only reason you can get a divorce. I don't know where those come from, but that's it. And it just wasn't working out for me. And so I worked at a bank about an hour from our home in the city, and I was looking for a way out of my marriage. And lo and behold, the way out of my marriage walked through the door. He's the best looking thing I've ever seen. He was about 5'6". I don't know what it is about short guys. I love short guys. Short guys and alcoholics, I love them. Anyway, short and alcoholic, it's a bonus. And so he was 5'6", and he had dark brown hair, and he had these baby blue eyes and this bright smile, and he always dressed to the nines. And every time that he walked in the bank, all the girls would bat their eyes and giggle at him, and all the guys would shake his hand and pat him on the back. And I would hide, because I could not form a sentence around him because I was so nervous. And that has not happened before or since, but that's what had happened at the time. And he was the attorney for the bank, and he was on my board of directors, and he was on my loan approval committee. And one day he called me and he said, I need you to bring a file down to my office, and if you'll bring it at noon, I'll take you to lunch. And I said, okay. And I did that. And I started seeing him, and I left my husband, and that's the order it happened in. And I'm just going to tell you, I don't recommend that. That is not a promotion. Don't do that. It was a huge mistake. I heard a lot of people that I wanted what I wanted when I wanted it. And, alcoholics don't have the corner on selfishness, just so you know. And, I did that. I started seeing him, and I left him, and that's the order it happened in. And I'm not proud of that. And I lied about that for a lot of years. And again, I want to look good, and I am the good girl, and I'm the one that's going to do everything right. So if somebody actually had enough nerve to ask me about it, which very rarely happened, but when they did, I would say stuff like this. I would say, oh, we were separated long before, I started dating him, and we were separated. I was in the kitchen and he was in the garage. We were separated because that's how I do, because again, I got to look good. And, or I'd say, oh, our marriage was over long before I started dating him. And actually that part was true. The part that was bad about that is that my husband didn't know that our marriage was over. And so, but that's what I did, because again, I got to look good, and I do everything right. I do not make mistakes. And that is a continuing thing, that theme that goes on throughout my life. So I start seeing this guy, and we're having a lot of fun, and he's great. And, everything's going good. And then people would find out that knew me, that I was dating him, and they would call me. And here's generally the conversation. They would call me and they'd say, "Hey, are you dating Cliff Gooding?" And I'd say, "Yeah, you know him?" And they go, "Oh yeah." And I'd say, "Well, tell me about him." And they'd say, "Well, you know, he's brilliant. He's so smart." And I knew that. He did his undergraduate in 3 years, and he graduated 7th in his law class. And he was top 5% in law school. So I knew that. And they'd say, "And he's really successful." And I'd say, and I knew that because he had this huge law firm when I met him, and he had all these people working for him. And then they'd say, "And he's a lot of fun." Well, I knew that because we had fun every time that we did anything. I don't care if we talked on the phone, we had fun. We had fun watching TV. We still have fun. And then they'd say, "But he's a liar, he's a cheat, he's arrogant, he's egotistical. You cannot trust him as far as you can throw him, and you need to stay away from him." And that is what they said. And what I heard was, he needs you, because I am the answer for everybody. In case you don't know, I am going to fix it all. He just needs the love of a good woman, and I am it. And so I continue to see him, and really everything's good for a little bit. And then I noticed that he doesn't sleep very well for like days at a time. And then he will sleep for like days at a time. And so I asked him about this, because I've never, ever had anybody who couldn't sleep, because I've always been able to sleep. And he said, "Oh, I have a sleeping disorder, and I have had it since college." And I said, "Well, you really need to see somebody about that. There's something wrong here. We need to get that fixed." And he said, "Oh, I've seen doctors and I've done sleep studies, and they can't figure it out." Now, if you say that to somebody who is normal, they might believe you, they might not, but it's not, they're just going to let that go. If you say that to somebody like me, it's a challenge flag, and we are going to fix you. Because obviously you're not going to the right doctors, and let me take over, because you're now my project, and this is now my job to make sure that you get your sleep. And so I start asking him questions and inquiring and watching, and then I do what any sane person would do in that situation. I move in with him, because you got to watch him 24/7, because I'm pretty sure that he's just drinking too much coffee and Dr. Peppers and too much screen time. But I'm going to fix it. And so I move in with him, and the more that I inquire about what's going on, and the more that I start looking, it seems like we start having arguments, and we start having problems, and we start fighting. And at first, those arguments are not that big of a deal. They're just little spats. And then, we get mad at each other. And then, a little bit later, he would come back and he'd apologize. And I wouldn't apologize. Let's just be honest. I've never apologized ever. But he would apologize, and then we would go back on. And so one day we got in a huge fight. And I left, and I've been gone, I think 2 or 3 weeks. And then he called me and he said, "You know what I think we should do?" And I said, "What?" He goes, "I think we should go see a counselor." And I thought that was a great idea. Now, I'd never been to a counselor before, but I knew something was wrong. And so I said, okay. And I'd never been to a counselor before, but I went into this counselor, and she met with her, and she had given me this intake sheet to fill out. And they have these questions on this intake sheet. And here are the questions. Have you ever drank more than 2 or 3 drinks at a time? Have you ever taken illegal drugs? Have you ever abused prescription drugs? Have you ever smoked marijuana? Have you ever had more than 2 sexual partners at a time? Have you ever dressed promiscuously? And I am a good girl. I am checking no as fast as I can check no on this form, thinking, who comes in here? I mean, really, I just need a little relationship advice. What is all this? And I really had no clue. I mean, seriously. And so I fill out the form. She comes and gets it. She says, listen, give me about 10 minutes to look this over, and then I will come back out and we will talk. And I said, okay. And it seemed like she had barely walked in the door before she just turned right back around. There was no 10 minutes. I'm not sure it was 10 seconds. She turned right back around and she looked at that form and she looked at me and she said, well, looks like the only thing that's sick about you is that you date Cliff Gooding. Let's talk about that. And that's what she said. And what I heard was, it's his fault. See, it's him. He's the problem. And so we start going to this counselor. And after we'd been going to this counselor for a while, he has convinced her that he is bipolar. And so she gives him medication for that. Now, I just need you to know that he is not bipolar, nor was he bipolar then. But he certainly acted like it, and it made perfect sense to me. And so now he has this medication he's taken. And so every time, which explains a lot to me, I got to tell you, when he has these high highs and he has these low lows, that's why. And when he, and then when he doesn't sleep again, it's because I forgot to take the medication. I didn't take the right dose of the medication. We have to change the medication. The medication is wrong. I mean, it made sense for everything that was going on. But it was still crazy. There was still craziness going on in our home. And we start fighting again, and it would smooth out for a few days, and then it would get nuts again. And it was the roller coaster ride that you hear about. And one day we got in a huge fight again because he gets paranoid and jealous. He's super jealous and super paranoid at this time. And I worked at this time. I sold radio advertising for years, and I was in sales. And a guy had called, one of my clients had called me on the phone, and I think I was outside or something, and Cliff had picked up the phone, and it was a guy who was a client, of course. And I walk in the door, and Cliff says, one of your boyfriends is on the phone, and takes my phone and throws it up against the wall. That's fun to explain to the client the next day, by the way. And then we start this roller coaster of, you don't love me and you're going to leave me. And so I do what anybody would do in that situation. I marry him to prove to him how much I love him. Again, this makes total sense at the time. I know it sounds insane now, but at the time it made perfect sense. So we get married. And, and we start, and again, the fights just continue. And again, the roller coaster ride, it just gets worse. And what you need to know about that is that when we got married and we started seeing each other, I had a little boy that was 4 years old, and he had a little girl that was 5 years old. And they had been around us during the summers and on weekends, because neither one of us had custody, which I'll talk about that later. And those little kids have seen and heard their parents do and say some horrendous things. Those kids have heard us say stuff to each other that I wouldn't say to my worst enemy today. And they have seen us treat each other. I wouldn't treat anything or anybody the way that I was treating him back then. And they were seeing all of that. They saw every single bit of that. And I am not proud of that. But that is just what happens in an alcoholic home when there's no recovery. There is no solutions. There is nothing going on. And I have no idea how to parent. That's the truth. And even when I'm not screaming and yelling at him, there's other things going on. I mean, when Cliff can't be available to do something that we've planned, I make sure that they know that it's all his fault why we're not getting to do what we said we were going to do. And I'm just going to tell you, if I'm in a bad mood and everything's wrong and they're saying, Mom, what's up with you? It's always his fault. And I make sure that they know it's always his fault. And one time we had gotten in, Cliff's not a violent man. He absolutely is not a violent man. But you put enough drugs and alcohol into somebody, you have no idea what's going to happen. And on this particular day, we got in a huge fight. I can't tell you to this day what it was about. I have no idea. Apparently, it was important at the time. And he is, and for some reason, he lays hands on me and he grabs me and he's pulling me down that hall by my hair. And I'm just going to tell you, I am no victim. I am a committed volunteer, but I am no victim. And I and I give just as good as I get. I mean, I grew up with my dad and my brother, and my sisters are pretty tough too. And so I'm punching and kicking and fighting right back. I'm just telling you. And as he's pulling me down the hall by my hair, my little boy was about 8 years old at the time, and he came out of his room. And he sees this, and he's scared to death, and he is crying, and he's shaking, and he's begging us to stop. And what I say is, go back in your room. Go back in your room, because that's the only answer I have, because I don't know what I'm doing. And that's the parent I am. And he does. He goes back in his room, and we continue on. And, eventually the fight stops. And the next morning we get up and nobody mentions it. We don't talk about it. It's not explained. Nobody apologizes for, what I just put that boy through. I never say to him, I'm sorry that happened. And, and you should have not seen that. None of that. We just ignore it. It's just like it didn't happen, because that's how I deal. Because I don't know I do not know how to be a parent. And in an alcoholic situation, for sure. And so one day, this counselor that we'd been seeing for 2 years, by the way, says to us, I can't help you anymore. Basically, we're going to send you someplace else. She was just sick of us. That's the truth. And so she sent us to this other counselor, or psychiatrist, psychologist. To this day, I still don't know what her credentials are, but she was great. And she sent us there, and she had him figured out in like 3 visits, which is amazing. Of course, what I found out later is that she had like 8 years in Al-Anon at the time, but I didn't know that. I didn't even know what Al-Anon was. But anyway, and on the 3rd visit, she says to me, because he has now been up for 3 days at a time, and once again we're in this horrible fight again. And she says, okay, here's what we're going to do. I'm going to write you a prescription for tranquilizers, and I want you to give him one at 6 o'clock, and if he's not asleep by 10, give him another one, and then I want you to go to bed. And I said, okay. And that's what I did. I gave him one at 6, and I gave him another one at 10, and went to bed. And I got up the next morning, and he was not in bed with me, which at this time is not an uncommon occurrence. Usually he has passed out on the couch. I used to say fall asleep, but now I know he had passed out on the couch, or he had passed out in another room in our house. And on this particular morning, it was in our guest room on the other side of the house. And I got up to go wake him up, and I went to open the door, and it was barricaded shut with a love seat, which he had not done before. And the other door to the room was locked. And this was new. This had not happened before. But if you're an untreated Al-Anon of my type, you would know that that's not a barrier for people like us. We can pretty much break in anywhere that we need to. If you had an alcoholic in Fort Knox, I'm pretty sure we could get to them. It's just not a problem for us. And so I break in that room, and it's just a gift. I mean, things about Al-Anons that are untreated, I'm just going to tell you, here's a couple of things. We can find you anywhere. We can get in wherever you are. We can hunt you down. We can seek and destroy. It's just bred into us. It's at birth. I don't know. I'm still convinced to this day, if you would have told a bunch of untreated Al-Anon group that Osama bin Laden was an alcoholic and that his family needed him at home, I'm pretty sure we could have tracked him down without military action. I'm just saying, we can do it. And so I break in on him. And he's passed out in bed, and he's naked to the world. And next to the bed is an empty bottle of vodka and an empty bottle of wine. And up next to the bed, where he has pulled up a TV, on top of the adult videotapes that had ran out, was this little clear package with some white substance in it. And that's how I found out what was really going on. Up until that time, I really didn't know. I knew there was something wrong with him. I thought he was crazy. Pretty sure he was having an affair, and I was trying to catch him do that. But I really didn't know it was drugs and alcohol until that day. And when I tell this story, I've had people come up to me and go, oh, you were just in denial. And I was like, nope, I wish I could blame denial. I was just an idiot. I had no idea. But anyway, I grabbed that package with that substance in it, and I hit him as hard as I could hit another human being, and he bolted up out of that bed, and I shook that package at him, and I said, what the heck is this? And those are not my exact words, but we're just going to go with that. And I said, what the heck is this? And he looked at that package, and he looked at me, and he goes, I don't know. And another fight ensued. When he tells this story, he says, I guess those people that barricaded me in here must have dropped it on their way out. But we had this huge fight again, and I told him to leave the house, and he did. And he came back a couple of hours later, and I said, and I left, and I told him to leave, and he said, I don't know where to go. And I said, why don't you go tell Wilma what you've been doing? Now, Wilma is my stepdaughter, our daughter's mother. And at that time, Wilma had about 13 or 14 years in AA. And I said, why don't you go tell Wilma what you've been doing? And so he left, and he came back a couple hours later, and I said, why are you here? And he said, well, I went and did what you said. I went and told Wilma, and she took me to a meeting, and we're going to do 90 meetings in 90 days. And I had no idea what he was talking about. I had no idea what he meant. I didn't care. And I said, I don't want you here. And so he left, and I called Wilma. And I wish I could tell you that I called Wilma, because I knew that she would have a solution for me. And she had 13 or 14 years in AA, and I knew that there was some answer there. But I called Wilma to check up on him. And she answered the phone, and I said, did he tell you what he's been doing? And she said, yes. And we went to a meeting, and we're going to do 90 meetings in 90 days. And again, had no idea what she was talking about, and I did not care. And I said, well, that's great. What do I do? And she said, would you be willing to go to a meeting with me tomorrow? And I said, yes. And I'm going to tell you why I said yes. I'd spent years trying to get this man to do and act the way that I thought that he should do and act. I have tried everything to fix him. I tried everything. I have searched through pockets and cars. I have followed him. I have tracked him down. I have listened to voicemails. I have searched emails. I said that one time, and a girl came up to me afterwards, and she said, how did you get his password to his email and his phone? And I was like, that is a rookie move. You may not qualify for this program if you don't know how to do that. But anyway, but I have tried everything. I have threatened. I have begged. I have pleaded. I have guilted. I have shamed. I've done everything to get him to do and act the way that I think that he should do and act. And none of it worked. None of it worked. And so I was out of ideas, and that's why I said, yes, I would go to a meeting. Actually, I had one more idea. The only other thing that I could come up with was I was going to kill him. He was going to have to die, and that would solve my problem. And I'm still convinced to this day, one of the worst things that can happen for untreated Al-Anons is for us to watch too many episodes of 48 Hours Mystery and Forensic Files, because we have planned your death so many times, you have no idea. And I am pretty sure that we are going to be able to get away with it, because we've learned from those other people's mistakes. I mean, if you watch those over and over again, Joy Hall watches them, I know. Joy Hall and I are the same. This is totally true. We watch every serial killer, murder, kidnapping, rape victim stuff, anything that we can watch on TV, we will watch until about November. And then it's the Hallmark stories for months until Christmas is over. And that's how we are. And there's something's wrong with us. I know, but that's why she's one of my favorite people. We totally identify. But I'm not kidding you. I watched all those. And if you watch enough of those, you will see that they kind of all make the same mistake every single time. So we're pretty sure we figured it out. And I know that I have friends like Joy who will help me get rid of the body. So it was either go to a meeting or kill him. So I thought a meeting might be a little bit easier. So I tried that. And I went to my first meeting with her, and she took me to my second meeting, and she took me to my third meeting. And I don't know how you guys got here. I got here with the ex-wife, and that's how it worked. And so I started going to meetings, and 45 days later, Cliff relapses. He comes in the door. I said, you've been using? He says, no, I haven't. And I said, you've been drinking? He goes, no, I haven't. I said, we're going to do a drug test. He starts negotiating. Another fight happens. And another time I ask him that he tells him he can't stay here, and he leaves again. And again, I call Wilma, because that's the only thing that I know to do at this point is go to meetings and call Wilma. And so I called Wilma, and she said, you know what I think we should do? And I said, what? She said, I think we should get supervised visitation with our children. And I said, that is a great idea. And I wish I could tell you that I did that because I wanted to protect my kids, but I did that to punish him. I'll show you. Relapse on me, sucker. I'll teach you a lesson. And that's how I think. That's how I am. And so we go to this attorney the next day and to get supervised visitation with our children. who happens to be a member of AA. And she asked me, she said, do you want a divorce? And I said, no, I don't want a divorce. And she said, what do you want? And I said, I just want him to be okay. And she said, well, if that's true, then you need to really think about what you want to do and what you don't want to do and what you're willing to do. And you really need to think about it, and you need to be really sure. And then what you need to do is you need to go talk to him, and you need to tell him. And she said, and you need to be very matter of fact. Don't be wishy-washy. Don't give him any kind of wiggle room. You need to be very matter of fact when you go talk to him. She said, but when you do this, you need to be calm. Now I'm just going to tell you there are 1,000 adjectives that can describe me, and calm ain't making the list. I've never been calm in my life. I've never seen calm. My life runs on chaos. I do better in chaos. It's what I know, but I don't know calm. I don't know how to deal with calm. But after going to Al-Anon for 45 days, the one thing that I knew, the only thing that had kind of sunk into this brain was the serenity prayer. And like I said, I was in sales, and I was in my car a lot. I drove to appointments and people all the time. And so what I did on that particular day is I just drove in my car and I said the serenity prayer. And if I said it once that day, I said it 500 times. And then I asked him to meet me at home. And I went home that night, and when I got here, I grabbed his hand and I said, I know you must be scared, and I know you have a problem, and this has got to be hard for you. And I'm willing to do whatever I need to do. If I need to go to treatment or counseling or meetings or whatever it is that I need to do, I'll do that. I'm happy to do my part, but only if you can do your part. And if you can't do your part, I can't stay. And that may not sound like a big deal to you, but I'm just going to tell you at the time, it was everything to me. Because up until that time, up until that exact moment, I had never been okay without him. I've never been okay without another man. I've always had to have somebody else, whether it was Cliff or if it was the husband before Cliff or the boyfriend before that. I've always had to have a him to make me feel better about me. And at that point, when I said, you know, if you can't do this, I can't stay, I knew no matter what he said, I was going to be okay. I really did. I mean, I knew if he had said, screw you, I'm going to keep doing what I'm doing. If you don't like it, leave. I was going to be okay. And I not only did I know it, I knew it in my brain, I knew it in my heart, I knew it in my soul, I knew it in my gut. I knew I was going to be okay. I knew that God got me. I knew it. And so he didn't say that though. He said, you're right, I have a problem. He also told me he did not have a sleeping disorder and was not bipolar, which I had figured out by that time, but it was nice for the verification. And I said, well, what are you going to do different? Because I knew he'd been going to meetings. And he said, I'm going to get a guy to sponsor me tomorrow that I know will hold me accountable, and I'm going to do whatever he tells me to do. And I said, okay. And that's exactly what he did. He got up the next morning and he asked that man to sponsor him, and he's been sober ever since. And that was almost 19 years ago, but not quite, because he has 18 and I have 19. And just until another few more weeks. But I just want to get that clear. Not that it's important. I'm just saying. But that left me with me. And I'm just going to tell you, I was crazy because I was going to meetings and I was watching him. And I was waiting because he's going to relapse and I'm going to catch him and then I'm going to punish him because that's what I do. And so I am watching and I am waiting. And I'm doing all the stuff that they tell you not to do in meetings. And I hear them tell me this, but for some reason it does not apply to me. And so I'm doing stuff like this. Did you go to a meeting today? Which meeting did you go to? Did you go with your sponsor or did you go by yourself? What did your sponsor say today? Have you talked to your sponsor today? What's going on? I mean, I am crazy. I am crazy woman. And I am watching and waiting. And, you know, he's doing what he's supposed to be doing. And he like lets me ask him all these questions. He doesn't even say anything. He just lets me go. And when we'd have an argument or a fight, you know what I would do? I'd call his sponsor and tell on him. And don't do that, by the way. But and his sponsor was really sweet, and he let me do that, you know. And I mean, it was just crazy. And I am going to meetings. And when I'm going to meetings, I am sharing about this, by the way. I am telling them what I'm doing, you know. And I'm just going to tell you, I don't know if any of you all have been to an Al-Anon meeting, but I'm just going to tell you, they are really patient with you for a while. And then after about 2 months, they're like, you've been here long enough. What is wrong with you? And that's kind of what happened. After about 2 months, I'm still sharing about this, that I'm watching and waiting. And I'm just scared to death he's going to relapse and I'm going to catch him. And finally somebody goes, do you have a sponsor? And I was like, oh, maybe I should get one of those. And so I did. There was this lady that I loved in these meetings that I went to. And every time that she shared, I swear she was talking to me. It was like it would hit me in the heart. And so one day I ran after her and I asked her if she'd be my sponsor. And she gave me her phone number and told me to call her that night. And I did. And the first thing she asked me was, why do you think you need Al-Anon? And so I told her everything he had ever done. He did this and he did that. And I caught him doing this. And I went on and I went on and I went on about him. And I don't know if I stopped or took a breath to this day, but she finally got in there and she said, well, now we know he's not the problem. You are. Let's talk about that. And she was so nice in those meetings. And I'm going to tell you what that did for me, though. As soon as she said that, it finally clicked. I'd been going to meetings this whole time and it finally clicked. And what clicked with me was, oh my God, I am powerless over alcohol and my life is unmanageable by me, because he was getting better and I was not. And it had nothing to do with him. And I did not know it until she said that. It was exactly what I needed to hear. And so that woman started taking me through these steps. And, we recognized that I was powerless over alcohol and my life was unmanageable. And step 2, came to believe that power greater than myself could restore me to sanity. And I'm just going to tell you, I grew up in church. I knew about God. That was not a problem. I was not insane. He was insane. Everybody around me was insane. I was not insane. And then she said, really, have you ever heard the definition of insanity, which is doing the same thing over and over, expecting different results? And that hit me, because every time that I did all those things that I told you about before, checking his pockets, checking the car, begging, pleading, threatening, all that kind of stuff, every time that I did any of those things, every single time I thought, this is the day he's going to hear it. This is the day it's going to work. This time it's going to matter. Every single time I thought, this is the day. And it was never the day. It never worked. And then we got to step 3, made a decision to turn our lives over to the power of God as we understood him. I'm just going to tell you, hardest step I had, the most difficult one for me. And here's what happened. We started on my 3rd step and she asked me this question, do you trust God? And I said, yes. And she was like, wrong answer. And I was like, I do. And she's like, no, you don't. And I was like, of course I do. She's like, you don't. And I go, why would you say that? And she said, I don't understand why you think you trust God. Let me ask you something. When is the last time that you've done anything, given anything to God and not tried to fix, coerce, manipulate, or manage it and just let it go? Tell me when you did that. I got nothing. I mean, I had nothing. I couldn't think of anything. The only thing that I could think of was when my son was 3 days old, he had to have open heart surgery. I gave that to God. And if I had been a surgeon, probably not. But other than that, that was the only time that he got anything, is when I was absolutely out of ideas and I had no other choice. That's the only time God got anything. And every other time I tried to run the show. And what she said to me was, you've been trying to do God's job your whole life. And she was right. So so she said, we're going to start practicing trusting God and get busy on your 4th step. And I did my 4th step. I called her. I said, I'm ready to do my 5th step. She said, great. Be at my house Saturday, 10 o'clock. And I said, okay. And on Friday before, my husband called me. And we had remodeled our kids' rooms and we were supposed to go get bedding for our daughter's room, Rachel's room. And he called me and said, guess what we did today? And I said, what? He goes, we went and got Rachel's bedding. And I instantly thought, how dare you? How dare you do that without my approval or my input? But I didn't say that because I had a sponsor. I just said, okay. And I went home and I said, show me what you got. And so they showed me and I said, this color doesn't match her room. This material is so thin, she's going to tear it up in no time. And you spent way too much money on this. And so the next morning I got up and I took that stuff and I threw it in the trunk of my car because I was going to take it back because I know better, because I'm always right. And I go to meet my sponsor for my 5th step, and know that this does not end well, just so you'll know. So I get there And I start on my fifth step and she stops me and she says, I got to go get a drink. I'll be right back. And she comes back and she says, okay, now before we start again on this fifth step, is there anything that might have happened that, that is not on this fifth step that you want to talk about? And my first thought was, oh my God, he called her. And so I said, yes. And she said, what? And I told her about the betting. And she said, well, do you know what you did when you did that? And I said, yes, once again, I had to be right and I had to be in control and I had to have my way. And she said, nope, that's not what you did. She said, when you told her that color didn't match her room, you told her that her opinion did not matter. And when you told her that material was too thin, she'd tear it up in no time. You let her know that no matter what decision she made for the rest of her life, you would always know better. And when you told her that it was too expensive, you told her she wasn't worth it. And you see, this is why sponsorship is so important, because those are the exact nature of my wrongs. And I never even saw it. I can see the big things, but I can't see those little things that do the damage. And I've been doing it to people I love all my life because I know better. I know better. And so we went back through my fifth step and we identified the exact nature of my wrongs in every area and every relationship in my life. And I'm just going to tell you, when I got done with that fifth step, going on to 6 and 7 was not a problem for me because I had now recognized who I was and what I was. She had me make a list of my character defects and she sent me home to look at 6 and 7. And I was entirely ready. There was no doubt about that. There was no wait time on 6 and 7 for me. There was no, do I want him to relieve me of these defects? There was no problem with that. I was ready to change. I did not want to be that person. I'd hurt too many people, and I could see myself for who I was for the first time in my life. It was the first time I'd been honest with myself. So then I did that. I made my list, my 8-step list, and I started making amends. And, one of the amends that I had to make was to my ex-husband because, obviously the way that I left was not appropriate. And he told me when I divorced him that he was going to make me pay and he was going to do whatever he could to make me pay. And he did. He did some pretty underhanded, crappy things and got custody of our son. And I thought that was the worst thing that could ever happen. And I was livid about it. And we had not said very many nice things to each other, and I had not been real kind to him. And over the years, and I had taken him back to court, and we had fought forever. And what I realized by doing this is that that boy had seen enough whores on the weekends that I cannot imagine what it would have been like if he'd been with me full time. And he was in a safe home with a good dad and in a good area, and I was grateful to him. And so one day when I was picking up or dropping off, I said, can I talk to you? And he said, sure. And I'm sure he was thinking, God, what now? And I said, I just need to tell you, I want to thank you for being Colby's dad. And you've done a great job raising him. And I want you to know that I appreciate everything you've done, and you've done a good job. He turned white. I was pretty sure he was going to pass out right there in the parking lot. So I left. And he called me when I got about 5 minutes down the road. And he said, I want you to know how much I appreciate you saying that to me. You see, I didn't think I'd done a very good job. I really didn't think that you thought that. And I can't tell you what that means to me. And somehow after that, he got better. And I got kicked out of that house, and I had not talked to my mom for 3 years. And then my sponsors had me start emailing her every week and then calling her. And one day when we were in a conversation, she brought up how many times she had cried herself to sleep for the way that she had treated me and the things that she had allowed to happen to me and the way she raised me. And out of my mouth came, well, Mom, you need to learn to forgive yourself because I've forgiven you a long time ago. And it was the truth. And I can't even tell you when that happened. And so I made the rest of my amends on my list, and I live in 10, 11, and 12 every single day. My dad died a month before I got in this program. And I was by that time I had become real close with my stepmom, and I was eating dinner at their house every Wednesday night. And after my dad died, my stepmom said, are you still going to come out for dinner on Wednesday nights? And I said, of course I am. And she said, oh, I'm so glad. I was really thinking that you wouldn't. And I'm thinking it's a free home cooked meal. And so I continued to do that. And about 5 years after my dad died, she met this man and she wanted me to meet him. My stepmom is about 5'11", and she's strong woman. And she's like, I want you to meet Herschel. And I said, okay. And she said, I need to tell you something. He's only about 5'6". I said, you may not have noticed, Mom, but I'm okay with that. And met Herschel, 5'6", beautiful blue eyes, sweet man. And a few months later, they got married after they met. And he's a great, great guy. And about 5 years after they were married, my stepmom got sick. And she got organized pneumonia in her lungs. And she was in and out of the hospital for months. And she had never been sick a day in her life. And one day in January, I got a call from Herschel, and she had passed away. And I was not expecting that. I'd just seen her the Monday before. And the next day I was at Herschel's house, and we were waiting on my brothers and sisters to get there so we could make arrangements. And my stepmom had insisted on sleeping in her bed at the top of the stairs. And by the time that she would get to the stairs, she would literally collapse in bed because she could not breathe anymore. And Herschel had installed a chairlift for her, and it had gotten installed the day before she went to the hospital. And I don't know why I asked this question. It's not something I would normally ask, but I was talking to him, and I said, Herschel, how much did that chairlift cost? And he said, I don't know, like $2,700 or something. And I said, and she got to use it one time. And he looked at me without missing a beat, and he said, it was worth it. And that taught me this. No matter what has happened to me in my life, and no matter what pain I've caused others and damage I've done, and no matter what's been done to me, if it got me to you, it was worth it. I would not change 1 second of my life if it was going to cost me being here, because everything that I have in my life today is a direct result of this program. I have the God of my understanding today, which I did not have before I got here. And that God has given me so much, so much. It's given me the life I have today. It has given me the ability to be the wife I am today, and the sister I am today, and the daughter I am today, and the friend I am today. Everything about me, everything that I am today is because of this program. And I would not miss that for anything. I did a lot of damage with my kids, and I've had to make amends to them. I don't have time to go into all that, but let me just say this. My son is not an alcoholic. He's going to marry one, but he is not an alcoholic. And I've had my biggest struggles with him. And I've learned to be a good mom to him and to be available for him and not to try to run his life anymore. And that daughter that I told you about is out using and drinking to this day. She's lost custody of her daughter that she had, and she still gets to see her daughter, which I'm grateful for. And she's had another baby, but she's still out there, and she's still doing her deal. And it's ugly, and it's sad, and it's hard. And I ask that you just pray for her. And I have a good life today. I love my husband, and he's my favorite person in the world. And we have a lot of fun together, and he's my best friend. And we've been together. We've been married 21 years, and we've been together about 25 or 26. I never get that right, but it's around there. And there's no other person I'd ever want to be with. We have a fabulous marriage, and we have a lot of fun, and we've learned how to do that here. There was a couple, Jack and Hody Mitchell. They were an American Indian couple, and they were in AA. And Hody also was in Al-Anon. And when Jack passed away, he had 42 years of sobriety, and Hody had 36. And they learned this prayer. Actually, Hody learned this prayer in Arizona at an American Indian conference, and she brought it back. And there was a few of us that have learned it. And I always close with this, and it goes like this. I've been told that the reason we join hands is to remind us of the truth that we are no longer alone. Our prayers for the still suffering alcoholics in these rooms and on the streets. Hold on to the hand of the person next to you like your life depends on it, because someday it may. Thank you for holding my hand and allowing me to hold yours. And thank you for letting me be here today.